and your stories. Because everybody has a story with Jeff Seltzer. Everybody has a story with Jeff Seltzer. Brought to you by JeffSeltzer.com.
Hello and welcome to Everybody Has a Story with Jeff Seltzer. I'm your host, Jeff Seltzer, and you have reached episode 61 of my own personal midlife crisis. Thank you all for joining. Appreciate you all for coming, watching, listening, or however it is that you're consuming this media at this time. Before getting into the intro for the show, and I'll probably flip it up a little bit here, once again, some real quick plugs. So as everyone always knows, the Instagram for the show is at Everybody Has a Story Pod. If you want to be a guest or have any ideas to send over to me, send me a DM at the Instagram. TikTok is at Everybody Has a Story Pod. The YouTube is also at Everybody Has a Story Pod. You can email the show directly at everybodyhasastorypod@gmail.com. My personal website is jeffseltzer.com for all things Jeff Seltzer, as Claire at work always reminds me. We are on all podcast platforms. We are in video on Spotify and YouTube. We are audio, those two places, plus Apple, iHeartRadio, Amazon, Pandora, and pretty much anywhere else that you could find a podcast. With that said, I did want to get into my topic before introducing my guests for today. The idea of having a sibling. So I don't really talk about her too often on the show, but I do have a younger sister. She's about 3.5 years younger than I am. And the whole concept of having a sibling is really weird, right? So you spend the first, 15, 20 years of your life, where basically they're always there, right? You live together, you're in the same house, more than likely, you share a lot of things in common. You've got a lot of shared memories and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden, one day, one goes to college or one moves out or gets married or whatever. And you really don't see them that often anymore. It's like, after having 15 or 20 years or so, whatever, of that bond, it gets weirder and different, right? So for me growing up, it was before texting was really a thing and before cell phones were much of a thing. So, having that casual communication once you've moved out is a little more difficult. I'd imagine nowadays, with my daughters, when they move out, they can still fairly easily FaceTime each other or text. And it's not the same as living in the same house, but at the same time, communication is probably a little bit easier than it once was. So with that said, I would imagine, obviously, having a sister 3 years younger than me and then moving out and not seeing her anymore or not that often is weird. But if you are a twin, it's got even weirder, right? So I'd imagine, and again, I'm not a twin. I knew very few twins growing up. But I'd imagine your identity is often tied to one another, right? You're born, a few minutes apart, maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes apart. And from that point on, for at least your first 18 years, you're being confused for the other person. Oftentimes, you're probably sharing a bedroom. Lots of different things that, it's more, I'd imagine it's probably even tighter or closer than a normal sibling. It's the fact that you've got same identity, right? You look the same oftentimes. You might even sound the same, say similar kinds of things. So for me, the idea of talking to a set of twins or triplets or whoever I could get would just kind of be super interesting. I guess it's a topic that I know very little about. And the idea of the show is, Everybody Has a Story with Jeff Seltzer. Understanding the story of what twins growing up as a twin could be like. So with that, I did invite two people that are twins. That would be weird if it was three people that were twins. Not sure how the math would work out. So first of all, I'd like to invite Ken and Eric to the show. Welcome, boys. Thank you for joining.
Great to be here.
Awesome. So for those of you that don't know, just to kind of give a little background, Ken and I do work together. We've worked together for at least a year at this point, probably more, but I don't know that I knew of Ken before a year ago. And Eric, I had heard of him for a while, being that Ken is a twin. I've heard lots of stories about, what Ken's twin brother is like. So now I actually have the honor of meeting Eric. So that's awesome as well. So Eric, thank you so much for joining. Ken, thank you for joining. Before we get into your stories, I did want to give each of you 30 seconds or so to kind of say a little bit more about yourself. So being that I know Ken, I know that Eric was born first. I'd like to give Eric the opportunity to go first and give us his little spiel about who is Eric Christensen.
Thanks, Jeff. And thank you for referring to me as the alpha of the two before the podcast actually started. My name's Eric. I'm actually 4 minutes older than my sibling, my twin brother, Ken. And I am a veterinarian, so I'm not in the traditional corporate business world. So I have a small business with a number of other partners. I really enjoyed. I work on small animals and just a few exotics, and once in a rare while, some wildlife. I have a family, a beautiful wife, and 3 kids ranging from the age of 15 to 18. So we shipped one off to college just this past fall. And gosh, I mean, I really, if I'm not working, which I do a lot of, and if I'm not with my family, well, the best thing for me to do is just to be outside. I do a lot of outdoor activities and gardening, kayaking, fishing, camping, that kind of thing. So, and I share, of course, a lot of similar interests to my brother. So I'm honored to be on this podcast. I'm looking forward to sort of rehashing the past, and I'll hand it over to my brother.
Awesome. Thanks, Eric. I appreciate your sharing, and thank you for joining. Ken, so you did warn me ahead of time that your brother was significantly more verbose than you are.
How many seconds was that? Was that 30 seconds? Because I counted like 74.
I mean, what's the exchange rate of Ken to Eric in terms of talking seconds? I'm not really sure. But with that said, Ken, you do have a bit of a reputation yourself. So I'm curious to sit back and watch to see if Eric truly is, as you say, more verbose than you are, and how you compare to it, or if it becomes a competition. So Ken, whatever amount of time you think you need to introduce yourself, please feel free.
I was just going to say ditto, but I will actually expand on that and say that I also have a beautiful wife and 3 kids. That's been one of the great things actually about, having a twin. Eric and my sister-in-law, Corey, have a boy, then a girl, then a boy. My wife, Susie, and I have boy, girl, boy, and they pretty much line up age-wise, which is great. So they have a very close relationship. But I, outside of family, obviously work for a company and have been there for about 16 years. A lot of similar interests to Eric. We both have a passion for the environment. So in my spare time, I do work on the Environmental and Open Space Committee in my small town in New Jersey, and involved at church, and just enjoy the great outdoors, and thrilled, Jeff, that we were able to make this happen, because I've enjoyed listening to a bunch of our friends and colleagues at work being interviewed by you. So it's great to have a chance to share some of my own story and hear. Hopefully it matches up with Eric's, but as you'll see, our memories don't always align completely. So That was 29 seconds.
I thought that was 80 seconds, actually.
Ken, you were built for radio, hitting the post. Great job. So with that said, I did do some research in terms of twins coming into this episode, because I wanted to be prepared, right? I'm a professional here. I might not be paid for this, but I'm a professional, and I do my best to kind of, bring it all together. So first thing that I did was last weekend, I rewatched the Arnold Schwarzenegger, Danny DeVito comedy from 1987 called Twins, right? To understand what I can learn about twins. For those at home that don't know about the movie, it's a comedy. Long story short, Arnold Schwarzenegger and DeVito were basically the sons of a woman as well as 6 men. I'm not sure scientifically how that actually works. I'm not going to get too graphically into this, and it's not as dirty as everyone thinks. Scientifically, it was, I guess, IVF, but instead of having 1 male donor, there were 6 male donors, and somehow the specimens were all combined in a very scientific way. So in that movie, Schwarzenegger, who plays, I think Julius was his name, is supposed to be kind of like the master human who had like the best of everybody. And then Vincent was kind of the leftover, let's say garbage, as they kind of alluded to in the movie. I'm assuming that you guys were probably not conceived in the same way, so I'm not going to try to make too many one-to-ones with you guys versus the movie Twins. But it was a funny movie, and anybody who hasn't seen it, I definitely suggest going to see it. Then earlier today, I did some real research and found that about 1 in 42 children are twins worldwide. So the likelihood of being a twin is roughly, 2.5%, give or take, if my math is correct. With that said, natural rate, so they break up global versus natural. Natural, I assume, meaning without fertility help and different things, versus natural. Natural rate's about 1 in 250, but overall the average is 1 in 42. Now you guys are all, let's say, a couple years older than I am, so I assume probably science wasn't quite back then what it is today. So we're not going to get into how your parents had you, because that's probably another conversation altogether.
We did have electricity, though.
Inside and outside, or just inside?
Well, we had outside plumbing, but indoor electricity.
That's helpful. That's really, really good. That's definitely something that we can utilize in terms of understanding where you came from. So with that said, I guess my first question to you guys would be, we already discussed the fact that Eric is obviously 4 minutes older than Ken. So no matter what, Eric can always hold it over his head. And I assume you guys are both born on the same date. And it wasn't like Eric was born 11:57 p.m. and then Ken was born 12:01. So you have the same birthday. what are your earliest memories? And again, I don't expect you to say, "Oh, I was 3 months old and remember this," or whatever. But like, what are your earliest memories of like having someone who looks a lot like you, sounds a lot like you, and you're kind of, I guess connected at the hip, literally or figuratively? Eric, if you want to start, because you are the older guy, we'll go to Ken first next time.
Sure. Okay. Thank you, Jeff. Gosh, for me, we spent a lot of our very early formative years in New Jersey, but we actually had the opportunity through my dad's work to do a lot of international travel. So that meant that we actually lived in Japan for a total of about 3 years all before, I guess, the age of 10, right, Ken? Yeah. We also lived for a shorter stint in the Philippines. We were in Bahrain for a short time. I don't remember details about those very early years in Bahrain or the Philippines, but we did have some very interesting experiences in Japan as small little American kids. We had a little brother and a little sister eventually who were born in Japan. We were there for 2 different stints for a total of about 3 years. But when Ken and I went and we lived in a suburb of Tokyo called Setagayaku, we were 6, 7, 8 years old, active kids. We'd been in the United States and experienced, some of the sports opportunities you had after school. We grew up in a country setting where there was a lot of land, and you pretty much had, the free roam of the land. When you walked outside, there weren't many roads, not many cars. When we moved to Japan, of course, we were in this suburb called Setagayaku, and it was beautiful in many ways, but very, very crowded. And we had a tiny little backyard with just several bonsai trees, essentially in a rock garden. So we were, by default, sort of forced or encouraged by my parents to spend time in this little neighborhood. And overall, we were treated, I think, very, very well by my parents' Japanese friends and then Japanese adults. But as would be expected, there was some hostility directed towards the kids that were coming from out of town. We went to an international school where actually 60 plus countries were represented, including Japan. We had one of our best friends was a young guy named Richard Yamamoto. But anyway, the long and the short of it is
I'd say the long of it, but keep going.
We make a long story long, is you're saying?
we roamed the neighborhood with about 7 or 8 kids from France and South Africa and Japan and then my brothers and myself. And we were on our little banana seat bikes, and I'm not joking. We ran into some serious issues with some of the neighborhood kids. So we were oftentimes being chased down on our bikes, and the big thing over there was to get into fights, throwing rocks at one another. So it was we had a violent upbringing in a way while we were in Japan. It must have gotten all out of our system, because I think since we've returned to the States, we really never resorted to fighting. But that's where I just remember with Ken literally being by my side, hiding behind trees or whatever we could find cover behind while these big local kids were hurling rocks at our heads. And ultimately, it was a wonderful experience. But really, that was my first real.
We held our own.
We were much smaller then, so now I think we would be relatively big compared to everyone else. But back then, we were shrimps. And Ken got hit in the head twice, sustained pretty significant wounds. I don't credit myself with saving his life. It wasn't quite that dramatic, but I also fell down this Tokyo sewer. Ken helped me out there. So we spent a lot of time, a lot of idle time getting into trouble. My parents were very forgiving for the most part and understanding, but those are the set of memories I have with spending time with my brother earliest in life.
Got it. So a lot to unpack there. A lot we probably won't unpack there.
Yes.
Just a real random reference. Ken mentioned to me a few weeks ago that he believes that he's 1/8 of an inch taller than you. Is that accurate?
I mean, honestly, whenever we stand next to each other, someone's always trying to one up the other brother. So you'd have to have a very unbiased third-party judge, I think, to draw that conclusion. I think maybe he got me by 1/8 of an inch when we were at our peak, but he's settling faster than I am.
That's fair.
More muscular, though. That's where I focused.
That's fair. So Ken, outside of picking your brother out of a Japanese sewer, what would be your earliest memory of Eric? And do you reconcile with his memory, and do you have an earlier memory than that?
Yes, I agree largely with what Eric said. I think that was pretty accurate recollection. going back before then, I think what I remember most is we both had, and I go back and I'll look at pictures. We both had not long curly hair, but very curly blonde hair, almost strikingly so. And that all disappeared when we were 6 or 7. But I do remember us being sort of walked around. We looked a lot alike, obviously. And my mom had a tendency, like many moms of twins, to dress us up in the same clothes. So that got old by the time we were 9 or 10. But in the early years, it was sort of cute. So I remember that. And I also remember, interestingly, Eric mentioned we lived overseas, but we spent, much of our childhood in New Jersey in Morris County. And we went to a small school, kindergarten through 8. There were 220 kids. Our class had 30 kids, 2 homerooms, so we were split. But of that, actually, there were 32 kids, 4 sets of twins.
Oh, wow.
Eric and myself, and then 2 sets of identical twins and a set of fraternal twins. So it was amazing. So the reason I mentioned it is that the mother of one of the sets of twins was a photographer. And we had this unfortunate tradition every year of getting together by their swing set and taking these very awkward pictures and of course the girls grew and blossomed much more quickly than Eric and I did. So it's like these older women standing next to 2 guys wearing jams, which you might not remember, Jeff, but those were those sort of brightly colored, weird looking shorts from the 80s.
No,
I do remember that as well.
Yes.
Gotcha. So I guess my question would be, with 8 of 32 kids being part of twins, like what was in the water that it was way over indexing, beyond expectations?
25%. Yeah. Never figured that out.
No.
I don't.
The other 3 sets of twins turned out very nicely. It was Ken and I who were falling behind. So
Yeah.
I'm sure you both are great. Don't worry about it. I know very little about you, Eric, but the 2 of you seem like you've turned out okay years later. So I'm sure all is good there. Okay, so early in life, obviously, having a twin, having someone that looks like you has got to be, interesting, right? Because not everybody's got, almost someone who's identical to them. Did you guys get into any shenanigans in terms of like swapping off, like one pretending to be the other, showing up for someone else's appointment, or with friends or girlfriends or anything, let's say, innocent beyond that?
Not as much as you would think, actually. I mean, people often ask this question, and I would say since we went to such a small school with only 32 kids in our class, anytime we did try to do the old switcheroo or pull the wool over somebody's eyes intentionally,
right,
one of our friends would usually be able to tell the difference, and it didn't work all that well. Now, we were accidentally mistaken for one another all the time and have had some funny incidents over the years where, as one very quick example, Eric does his veterinary practices in Murray Hill, so the New Providence, New Jersey area. For many years, I worked at a company in New York City, and there was one day where I was actually around New Providence because it must have been I guess it was a weekday, but I was at home for some reason, and I was mistaken by one of his clients in the grocery store, and I got to the point where she just wouldn't believe that I was not him, that I had to show her my driver's license. And on that same day, and Eric, I don't know if you remember it, but one of my friends from work you were in New York for some reason.
Yes.
And that same day he ran into Eric and mistook Eric for me, which was really, really weird. And that happened a lot as kids, but yeah, not a lot of the old successful switching act. Eric, you can comment on girlfriends. I don't think we really.
Yeah. I mean, I would say we caused a lot.
Very high standards. So you could easily tell if Eric was substituted.
Yeah. We happened to, spend probably a lot more time than your average twin together, because not only did we go to grade school and high school together, but we ended up going to the same college. We were both at Cornell, and then I stayed on for veterinary school. Ken went to work in the beautiful metropolis of Buffalo, New York, for a couple of years. But because Buffalo, the social life was a little bit lacking in Cheektowaga up there, since it was winter about 6 months of the year, he'd come down to the veterinary school, which I graduated from vet school. I went and did some other work, and then I came back and I taught for several years up at the college. While I was teaching, Ken was actually up in it was when I was still in veterinary school. Ken was in Buffalo, and he used to come down on certain weekends, and he actually became very close friends with a lot of my close friends as a result. And I just remember that caused a lot of confusion for a lot of the the upperclassmen, people who weren't actually in my class. And he became very popular. And Jeff, I'll tell you this one story because, of course, he worked for Procter & Gamble at the time. Am I allowed to? I'm not sure I'm allowed to say that, but
you can say that. Yeah,
that's fine.
And,
He's no longer there.
He was in the feminine hygiene products division.
I think he still is actually, but continue, please.
Yes. And he used to, of course, in veterinary school, most of the veterinary students are pretty poor by the time you pay your loans. There's not a lot of extra money going around. And also veterinary school is around 80% women. So Ken would come on these weekends, and sometimes he would get these free samples, like massive boxes of various products. And he would stand on the balcony, almost like Santa Claus, and he would rain these things onto all of the well, not all.
That's a bit of an exaggeration.
So he became very popular as a result because, of course, they're not inexpensive, and he weaved his way into our social network quite successfully and has remained really good friends with a lot of my really good friends. So we spent a lot of time. We were on the same team in college as well, so we did confuse our coaches at moments there. But we didn't really we didn't trick the girlfriends maybe quite as much as other twins have.
So Ken, not to ask the question, but does that work? I've heard about like buying drinks or buying flowers or candy, but I mean, it's a different path, I guess, right?
I was just giving them out because I had nothing to do. I couldn't do anything with them, but I will say on that, one of the fringe benefits of being a twin is it's a great way of meeting other people.
Of course. And
so Eric and I, when we were at college, we had some friends in common, but then he would, because he was studying a different discipline than I was, we had sort of our own circles, and I met a lot of people through Eric, and I think vice versa. And interestingly, my sister-in-law, Corey, actually went to business school with my wife and me, and we thought that she could be a good, just had a lot in common with Eric, and Eric was, open and available at that time. So we had gone on a trip and with a number of other friends, Corey included, and we came back and we hosted a dinner at my apartment just to share pictures and stories and stuff, and invited Eric along. And we didn't have assigned seating, but we arranged sort of so that there was an open seat next to Corey. And we never envisioned that it was going to turn into a lifelong relationship, but lucky for us, actually, Eric and Corey started dating, got engaged, got married. And so that's just, I think, evidence of the fact that there is a real benefit of having a twin, because it's just something unusual, and assuming you like one another,
of course,
it's great way of meeting new people.
That was my lucky strike there for sure.
That's great. It's a nice love story, and the fact that you were able to find somebody. Eric worked met her through that or whatever, and obviously we're all living happily ever after. So that's great. Taking a step back for a second. So question was that I would have is, so obviously you guys grew up together, you guys went to high school together. Like when you guys were getting ready for college or applying for college, like did you apply to the same schools? Did you have the mindset of we'll go together? Did it just kind of coincidentally happen? Like take me through the journey of like ending up at the same undergraduate school. Eric, if you don't mind going first.
Yeah, Jeff, of course. Ken and I have recently experienced this with our own kids. Ken has 2 in college. I have my oldest in college now. So I can tell you the experience is drastically different today than it was back in the olden days when we were applying. I think I applied only to 4 schools. I think, Ken, you may have applied to 4 or 5, right? And we did have several schools we applied to together. I don't think we went into at least I did not, and I can't speak for Ken, but I don't believe we went into the process thinking, man, we got to stick together. We can't live without one another. We've got to hold hands through life and do all that. I mean, we had a very good relationship growing up, but we were still able to function on our own. It just so happened that, my dad and my grandfather, my uncles, and a variety of relatives had gone, and they all had such wonderful experiences. For me, it was a great choice because of the profession I wanted to enter.
Of course. And
it was also a great choice for Ken, but Ken, I won't speak for you, but I think we made the decision separately. It turned out to be awesome. I mean, as Ken said, we have a huge network of people we know, in part because there were 2 of us. We did confuse a lot of people up there. My one friend, Justine, who was a couple of years older than me in vet school, when she was in the undergraduate years, she worked at one of the gyms, and we were both rowers, but the place was called Teagle Hall. And so Justine would be working a 6 or 7 hour shift at Teagle Hall. And she said, this is unbelievable. This kid is here all the time, and she only told me this in veterinary school because that's when I got to know her. But it was funny. She was not recognizing that there were actually two individuals coming in at different times. So, and we also, the other thing is, when you're a twin, it's easy to make friends, but it's also easy to make enemies. So anytime someone, and I think Ken does the same thing, if someone takes a slightly longer glance at you or gives you a second look, I usually will sort of make an effort to introduce myself or at least say hello. So I make sure not to offend someone who may be friends with my brother, and we've met a lot of people that way. So it's been great.
Yeah, makes sense.
I think you got it right, Eric. I mean, I applied to mostly small liberal arts schools, and Cornell was the one exception. And I didn't apply there because Eric applied there. I just thought it would be interesting, worth giving a shot, and decided to go there. So yeah, turned out to be great, but that wasn't by design.
Gotcha. And then I guess, did you guys room together, or were you guys separate when you did move into school?
We lived separately the first 2 years, did our own thing. And then junior year, we split a place with 5 or 6 other, friends in common. And then senior year, we did the same with a slightly bigger group. So that was nice. It was a nice, nice compromise.
Nice. So you spent basically your first 21 or 22 years basically living either in the same building or same area or vicinity, right? Because obviously growing up together, you did. College, freshman, sophomore year, you were close together. Junior, senior year, you lived in the same house. So now you graduate college, right? And Ken, you go on your journey in one way, and Eric, you go a different way. Like, did it feel weird, like not being within, let's say, a few hundred feet of your brother, like every night? Or at this point, you kind of like said, okay, it's time to kind of grow up, move on in my life, and I'll, be more of a pen pal versus a roommate, I guess, at this point.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I noticed immediately was it was a lot quieter, which Eric had a tendency. You mentioned about twins sharing a room. We did share a room largely without incident for the first 18 years, and then obviously lived together a couple of years in college. He had this weird tendency of sort of grunting. I won't have you demonstrate it.
Well, I was asthmatic as a child, so he used to call me Wheezy. And I was being mocked for the disease that I had to struggle with. Luckily, I don't have that anymore because I probably would not remain. I
felt like I was living with a hedgehog, sort of like.
Well, I mean, come on.
Hedgehogs make this. Anyhow, the reason I mentioned it is, so there was the benefit of not having the grunting when I was off on my own. But honestly, it was quite lonely, not just because Eric wasn't there, but I went from a situation where for the first 21 years of my life, I had always been with other people and always at least had my brother, if not my other 2 siblings. And then suddenly I didn't think I was going to be in Buffalo when I went to work for P&G. I thought I was in sales. I thought my territory was going to be closer to home.
Right.
But it took me to the western frontier of New York State. And the people there were great. But I can remember my parents dropped me off and I was all alone in this apartment. I had set up a sort of this post-war apartment, not a lot of people around. I had a little radio at the time listening to Monday Night Football. My furniture hadn't arrived, so I was on a sleeping bag. And it was the first time I really felt like very lonely.
Yep.
So I think the downside of having all that companionship for so many years is that, at least for me, it made the initial adjustment to life sort of separated a bit more challenging. Eric mentioned that I did come back to Ithaca, to see other human beings periodically. But it made the adjustment a little harder. So yeah, it was interesting, but I've recovered.
And real quick follow-up question for you, Ken, also. So I know you had mentioned that you have 2 other siblings as well. Do you feel that you're as close to them as you are to Eric, or kind of like, how does that relationship feel? Because I'd imagine, like, obviously being twins, you guys have a natural bond. And having other siblings who are probably either older or younger or whatever else like that may have less in common. Like, did you guys feel like a tight-knit group of 4, or was there like an obvious, like tighter connection between any 2 or 3 of you?
I think, and I'm sure Eric would agree, but I'll let him speak to it. I feel tightly connected to all 3 siblings. There are certain, so it's 3 boys, and then my sister is 7 years younger than Eric and me, and 4 years younger than our younger brother. So I think at times growing up, there were the boys, and then there was my little sister. we may not have had quite as much in common at that point, but I definitely feel tightly connected, and family's always been really, really important. There are times though, like Eric and I can complete each other's sentences, and there is something unique about that relationship, but fortunately we're close as a total sibling group.
Nice. And Eric, question for you then too is, so like, I guess, now that obviously you guys have your own lives and you're older and such like that, like how often do you you hang out with Ken, his family, or your other siblings and their families, stuff like that?
Well, we're lucky in the sense that Ken and I our families live about 25 minutes away from one another. So, we will have, we just had breakfast last week with my uncle, my youngest son. We get to, because we share a lot of the same interests, we'll, I'd say, see each other on a fairly regular basis, and our families get together quite often as well. We'll be hosting Christmas and they'll be there. Nice. So we probably see each other, once every month or so, especially during the warmer months, when we can go out and kayak or they come over and swim. And because our kids are so close in age to one another and their interests are similar, they're like a little bonded pair. You got, Luke and Danny are the oldest, and then Maddie and Allie, and then Todd and my son Jake. So I think that's been a blessing. We would love to see my little sister and my brother as often as possible, and we did when they lived locally. But my little sister's down in the Maryland area, and my little brother Scotty moved up to the Boston area a couple of years ago. So we don't get to see them quite as much. Whenever we do have the chance, we love doing it. My little brother Scott can sort of jump into the fray, and he's got 3 boys. He's got a set of twins. He's married to a twin, and his 3 kids get along very well with ours. And then my little sister has 2 little boys. And once everyone gets together, it's like, you just saw each other yesterday. Nice.
Question on that also, actually. So I mentioned in my preamble that I have a younger sister, 3 years younger than I am. And obviously, growing up, it's weird that, eventually you move out, you don't see them as often. This past weekend, for the first time in probably almost 2 decades, I actually hung out with her one-on-one, right? Like as you get older, those types of things don't naturally happen as much because you've got spouses, you've got kids, and the dynamic just changes, right? So like it was a lot of fun. So me and my sister went to a comedy club in New Brunswick, went out to dinner. It was cool. We spent a couple hours together, which I can say again, like in probably 15, 20 years, it's probably the first time that we just hung out for an evening, just the 2 of us one-on-one. For you guys, like, do you ever get that kind of opportunity? Do you try to? Is it more larger group settings with friends or family? Or like, what does that look like?
Yeah, I would say we haven't had an intimate dinner together in a while, but we do tend to, while we'd be, I think, perfectly happy doing that. And we do. We have long text exchanges back and forth. A lot of our get-togethers tend to have 1 or 2 other people, whether it's family members or friends. One tradition that we've done 3 times, I think, at this point is, it's not exactly an annual thing. It's like once every 7 or 8 years, but the 2 of us, our younger brother, and then some college friends get together and go out and do a bit of an adventure for a week or so. So that's been great. And then he and I are taking our 4 boys skiing to Washington State if Mother Nature cooperates. Yeah. So there's a lot of togetherness. It's, we'll carve out time, and like when we're over at each other's houses, he's got this incredible garden that I enjoy seeing, and we could spend hours talking about, the tomato crop or the potatoes and what's happened with this. We both like wildlife and sports and stuff. So there's some of it, but a lot of it is in the midst of other people.
Yeah. Usually our wives will, when we have family gatherings, again, we're blessed to live in an area of Jersey where there's some space. So, when the kids were young, especially, we take the guys would take them for tractor rides. And I think that our wives just enjoyed with my parents or their parents, just the peace and quiet that was associated with having Eric, Ken, and Scotty take the crew in the tractor and have them go for a while so they could actually have a moment to talk and such. So we do share a lot of time together, but I agree, we've yet to try really the one-on-one thing. I think we spent probably enough time together, as you said, for the first 21 years that I'm not sure we even need that really. But we do enjoy each other's company.
Gotcha. So, I don't know what you guys, I guess, long-term career plans or retirement plans are. Those are obviously personal thoughts or whatever. But do you guys see I guess a timeline where you both eventually retire and like live in the same areas, or like distant parts of the country at some point, or like is that even like something you guys even chat about? Ken, you want to go first?
Sure. I mean, we haven't talked about moving per se in retirement to be closer to one another. I think we envision spending more time together once we're free of the working obligation. We have toyed at times because we typically will do a family reunion once a year, sometimes with the extended family on my dad's side, and then in some years just our immediate, like my parents and our siblings and spouses and kids. And we've talked about, maybe we should consider trying to buy a small place where we could gather more regularly because we always have so much fun. We haven't really advanced that thinking, and then college tuition gets in the way. So I would say we haven't been explicit about retirement plans, but I definitely envision spending a lot of time together, and hopefully Eric feels similarly. We'll see.
Yes. I'm not sure when retirement will happen, but when it does, I do plan on that. I don't have this burning urge to leave my wife thinks of it as a homestead. I don't think she sees it in quite the same light I do, but I oftentimes struggle with the idea of what I'll do once I'm not working. I mean, I'm not eager to jump ship and go to Florida or, travel the world endlessly. I like the idea of doing some of that, but I also like the home we've built here, and I'm hoping my sibling doesn't, move out of the state immediately when he retires. So
think of all the new radish varieties you can experiment with.
Yes, I am a bit of a dick. I do it.
Vegas.
I know. I don't plan to retire just to do gardening. That's for sure. But there's so many other, unfortunately, I love my career, so I don't have this burning desire just to leave it. But I do imagine that, one day when I do retire, hopefully I will get to spend time with all of my siblings, including Ken.
Nice. Very cool. Very cool. So we are running towards the end of the show here. Ken, is there anything that you'd like to promote or support or plug, or anything else you'd like to share about your brother that maybe he hasn't got out yet?
Well, he is a terrific guy, which is not surprising given that we're related, but he is genuinely a terrific guy. Interestingly, I think he still has there's still a couple of folks at our company who take their pet to him, and I've always gotten good reports. But one really quick anecdote, Jeff, that I just wanted to share as a memory from Japan, and it's related to sort of the curly blonde hair and all of that stuff. But it's a call to action for anybody listening who might have access to really old commercials. But Eric and I were featured in an Americana-themed Wonder Bread commercial in the early 80s, where we had to dress up in these ridiculous red, white, and blue sailor suits and pretend to play piccolos and march, along with the only thing that qualified us was they wanted kids with blonde hair, and we happen to have blonde hair. So I have never been able to get a copy of that, but if someone out there does see it, I think we would be willing to pay not a small fortune, but a small sum for access to that. That was... And we made we made 10,000 yen, which sounds great, but that was only $100. So
are there any residuals that come through, or is that a one-time payment?
I think Japan doesn't have those SAG rules, so they just pay you once, and then they exploit you for the rest of your lives.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
But no, so thank you for having us. I really enjoyed it, Jeff, and
of course
I'll let Eric talk.
Thank you, Eric. Anything you'd like to support, promote, plug, or any last anecdotes you'd like to share?
Well, I also think very highly of my brother and admire him in many ways. He's a man of great character, bad hair, but a great character. And he really stands up for what he believes in. He set a great example for his family, including my own children. And I've got so many anecdotes. As you said, I could talk for hours just about all the good times in the past, but we really we were blessed with a great childhood. I credit my parents for that, and my grandparents and my extended family, and my twinship was just an added bonus. So I think you can have fun in life as a single kid, but if you have a twin, and as long as you're not incredibly different, I think it's just sort of living life on steroids to a degree. It does cause some angst at times. It can suffer because of my asthma, I guess, as a kid. I will say, here's an anecdote, Jeff, actually. Yes. When we lived our senior year, we were rowers in college. And so we had a rowing house. So we lived with 8 or 10 of our other teammates. We had the upper floor and the lower, or the second and third floor. And Ken was, along with a number of my other teammates, they were on the third floor, and they were sort of known as the old men because they would go to bed at 9 o'clock at night, and they would yell if someone was making noise or having a good time. And then I would
row twice as fast, though.
They were committed to getting a lot of rest. I mean, but so they were sort of living life in their 40s when they were 20. And then the second floor was where I lived with some of my other buddies, all of whom are great guys. But I just remember we always used to think of them as the crotchety old guys at 110 at Oak Street up in Ithaca. And he's not quite that much of a geezer. Well, I think we're both gray and feeling our age to a degree, but he's still very young at heart. And, I'm glad to have him as my twin.
Thank you for the pick me up at the very end.
So the learning here is that in physical years, Eric is older, but in terms of psychological years, Ken is the elder here.
Apparently, and my real age is 86, according to Eric.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm no party animal myself. I'm in bed by 9:30 myself, so I'm probably well beyond my years at this point too. So, guys, thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate your time and obviously you sharing your personal stories too. Really, really awesome. Obviously, Ken, working with you has been great. And Eric, obviously meeting you and hearing of you through your brother has been amazing too. So thank you both for sharing everything that you have. So with that said, everybody listening at home, watching, wherever you are, as a reminder, the show's Instagram page is at Everybody Has a Story Pod. The DMs are open, so if you want to be a guest, feel free to shoot me a note through there. TikTok is at Everybody Has a Story Pod. YouTube for the show is also at Everybody Has a Story Pod. You can reach out to the show directly via email at everybodyhasastorypod@gmail.com. For all things Jeff Seltzer, you can always check me out at jeffseltzer.com. Everybodyhasastorypod.com is up as well. Not really sure what's going to go up there, but it does exist. Reminder to tell everybody that we are on all podcast platforms, audio everywhere, video are both on Spotify and YouTube. With that said, I do probably have 1 or 2 more episodes coming out before I go on break again, but I hope everybody has a great Christmas, great New Year, whatever you're celebrating. Let's just make sure it's great. Thanks, guys. Have a great week.
Thank you.
Everybody has a story with Jeff Seltzer. Everybody has a story with Jeff Seltzer. Everybody has a story with Jeff Seltzer. Everybody has a story with Jeff Seltzer.